Martha Joe Black is the daughter of baseball great Joe Black. She is in Chicago where she sells fan experience for the Chicago White Sox. She's done a myriad of things, including serving on several boards like the Comprehensive Cancer Center of Northwestern University, where she helps, or they help to accelerate discoveries to detect and treat cancer earlier and with greater precision. But she is also the author of the new book, Joe Black, More Than a Dodger. Hi, Martha.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
So I know part of the reason you decided you wanted to write the book, not only because your father was a great man, but you also have had what you say is a vibrant, challenging, and ultimately fulfilling life growing up with Joe Black. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, yes, I did. My father won custody of me because my parents, like a lot of families, unfortunately, went through a divorce. Started when I was 3, finalized when I was 5 years old. We were in Paradise Valley, Arizona, because that's where Greyhound Corporation moved their offices from Chicago in 1971. And my dad won custody of me. So you can probably imagine in the mid-70s, it was very rare for an African-American man to get custody of a 5-year-old daughter. And he did win custody, and my dad did my hair. Yeah. And literally, if you could see this, this was one of my dad's fingers, 2 of mine together.
Uh-huh.
Be on the phone with my cousins, like a real phone, not cell phone, and be like, now, what do I do with her hair? I put the ribbons in, and he would do that. And my father fought for everything for me. I mean, he predominantly raised me by himself. He did allow my mother to see me, obviously. He gave my mother more right to see me than what the court papers stated. But my dad did everything. I mean, when he did his speeches, I had to do my homework at the dining room table with him so he could check them, because my dad was a school teacher when he retired or left Major League Baseball in 1957. And so he went back home to Plainfield, New Jersey to teach at Hubbard High School and teach all those young kids to be men. And as my dad had little pets in his class, because he was like, yeah, you're a little iffy, so I'm going to watch you even closely.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how my friends felt when they would come over. Everybody got a lecture.
Yeah. And I bet dating was interesting too then.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. My dad was 6'2" and a half, over 300 pounds when I was born. So when we were young at 16, we think, oh, he's cute, and boys at the time would come over and they were like, your dad's big.
Yeah.
So then they ended up ignoring me and talking to my dad about baseball.
Oh.
That's the end of that.
Yeah.
As all my dirt is in the book, let's see, my dad snatched me out of a club at 16. My friends to this day still remember that.
Right.
When he walked into Tommy's. And I did date James Baldwin, who played for the Chicago White Sox a long time ago when we were both young. And my dad went in the clubhouse and said, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And Frank Thomas and Albert Bell were players, too. And they said to James, they're like, JB, wait till you meet the real JB. And he's like, I'm not scared. And then after we stopped dating a week after, my father went in the clubhouse to talk to him. So, I mean, it's not bad. But it was a little tricky to date people. And obviously, my dad's in heaven, and I'm still single. It's very crazy.
So tell me, what was the, because you sound like a daddy's girl, and I'm a big old daddy's girl too, and my dad played baseball, and that was really one of the things that bonded us. I mean, I had a sister, but I was the only one, who wanted to go to the ballpark with him and watch him play. And, I grew up in St. Louis, so he played by Anheuser-Busch. So it was the smell of the beer brewing, and it was the sound of the bat cracking and all of that. What is the most special part of your relationship with your father?
I would say my father always made time for me. I could tell you, and I remember this verbatim, I was, let's say, about 4 years old, and I played Barbie a lot. As daddy's girls were like, oh, to play with my doll, I'd be with my dad. And he came home in Arizona. It's hot. I will never forget. He had a brown suit on. He had a briefcase, and he came in the door, and I was like, Daddy, play with me. My dad put his briefcase down, took his jacket off, and got on the floor with me and played. I would say as an adult, even when I moved to Chicago, he and I talked at least 2 to 3 times a day. I talked to him about everything, from business, from life, or just to have just a normal conversation that most of us have with our parents. So it was just a bonding that I just always felt very connected to him, as well as it's in the book at the final inning of the chapter. My dad was in New York on 9/11, and I knew in my heart he was okay. But the day my brother said he found our dad on the floor, I knew something was wrong.
Right.
And so, and that's when I went home to say, I'm going to try to be here for you. And obviously I didn't do that great of a job because he passed away on the 17th. But, you know, it was just a very special connection. And I did not know my grandmother, who I'm named after, my dad's mom, but my dad and his mother had a very special connection. He never wanted to disappoint her, and I never wanted to disappoint my father. So I did, and it's horrible to say this because we all should be doing our jobs to empower ourselves, and I only worked hard so I would make my father happy. And I work for his friends, so I work hard to make Jerry Reinsdorf happy now.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I know that you know, I write books too, and I know it's a very healing and introspective process. And even though if you're writing about somebody else, I just think the act of writing opens you up on a different kind of level. It's like therapy. What was your process for writing this book about your father?
Well, Chuck Schaffner and I did the whole thing together, and because it's kind of like if you have a co-writer in yourself, if you were writing something and then they write it, it's very hard to blend everything together because it's two different verbiages, so to speak. Excuse me. And so I would talk to Chuck mostly, and I was like, well, I have to work because I have to make my dad's friend happy. I work for Jerry Reinsdorf. So Chuck's like, well, I will type out everything. So he interviewed me a lot. We talked on the phone probably every single day. This had lasted for 7 years. We emailed every day. And he came here. I went to Iowa. So we did a lot of that. And like I said, it took 7 years. And it was very healing to the point that, and I would say, like you just brought up, it's like therapy. You know, when Chuck and I are working together, it wasn't his life, so he wasn't there when, you know, in front of saying my father's sick. And so when somebody forgets something, you have to repeat it over and over again. So after a while, it does heal you. And it also brings up the points that, the funny parts in the book that at least made me laugh to remind me of all those good times. Instead of being like I was very angry when my father died because my mother died in March, my dad died in May.
And how long was your father sick? Let's talk about that for a minute. What was that like for you?
He actually, nothing was wrong with him physically that, you know, we could all physically see until New York on 9/11. I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think the stress of seeing people jump out of buildings and everything, and granted, my father was in World War II. He was not on the front line of that. As it's in the book, I guess his IQ was too high for that. It's very strange how they determined that back then. Since my dad had an IQ of 149, and that messed him up. When I would talk to him, he said he doesn't sleep. He didn't sleep regularly. He told me, and that's before I went home to try to stay there with him, that instead of going to bed, let's say at 10 p.m., he would be in bed by 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and then wake up at 7 and be up till 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
You know, and then like I mentioned, my mother passed in March, and I went home, and my dad, obviously, as a good dad, picked me up from the airport. And for me, I could tell he lost a lot of weight. Granted, he was not as full, like, you know, when you see people and they're bigger, but you can tell when you're healthy because you're full and you're very, you know, put together. That my dad was a little bit skinnier, which is obvious to tell. And the cart you would have in the airport, he would have to hold on to that and stuff like that. So I could tell by that. I know Frank Robinson also saw him when he was ill, and he could tell as well. But my dad always kept a good attitude about everything. But I guess if you went through segregation, how could you let this keep you down?
So was he officially diagnosed?
He was not diagnosed until my brother found him on the floor.
Okay.
And had our neighbor, in Arizona, Mr. Livermore, helped my brother pick him up because he was still heavy. And at, I think, the second time Joe Grazioli Sr., my brother called him, and then they had an ambulance come get him, and that's when he was diagnosed. It was kind of ironic. I work for Jerry Reinsdorf and my dad. Jerry's like, yeah, your dad told me the year before that his PSA was at 9. And he never went to the doctor.
And so for those of us who are not familiar with that, what does that mean?
The PSA is a different level when men should all go to the doctor regularly. And when they do, they should check them because that's the determination of prostate cancer. So if your PSA, I don't know how low it is. I just know 9 is very high. But if, let's say, it was at 2, you're probably normal. So it's just one of the tests, kind of like women go to the OBGYN and they test everything and they're like, oh, okay, everything looks fine. They just don't give us numbers unless it has to do with cancer.
Gotcha. I'm talking to Martha Jo Black. She's the author of the new book, Joe Black, More Than a Dodger, which is about her father and her life with her father. What you say that your father was more than a Dodger, and just from our conversation, I can tell that. But what do you think that his message was to the world?
I would say he would tell every young person, especially, live your dream, your legal dream, obviously, and get an education. And that includes the millionaires that play professional sports, because when you're done, there's only so many TV and radio jobs out there.
Right.
And we know athletes do get married, they have children. A lot of times when you're done playing, you're not married anymore, and you have to have more than 1 or 2 cars. You have 10. So since we don't save money that well,
right.
Get an education so you have something to fall back on. That was the most important thing that my father wanted people to do. I would like to add in that, and go to the doctor. Because we have to take care of ourselves, because the stronger we are, the more.
Yeah, I know one of the things that Tom does is he does a take a loved one to the doctor season, and he wanted to call it take your damn man to the doctor, but the sponsors didn't like it that much, so we called it take a loved one to the doctor. But that is his message, that most men, they don't like going to the doctor anyway. They really don't like getting certain things done when they go to the doctor when they get to a certain age, but that it's important as women who love our fathers, our sons, our husbands, our whatevers, that we make sure that they do go to the doctor. Do you think that your dad is proud?
I do. I think that he, because I can tell you, when I was promoted, when I first worked for the White Sox, because I left for a few years, and I had an office then, and it was funny because I had every picture of my dad up, and my dad wrote me a letter, because he would write me letters all the time, and he was like, kid, I have to tell you, I am so honored, and I have to say I'm embarrassed, because I had no idea how much you loved me. And I think because my brother was born in 52, and it's because of me wanting to do this book about him that I could see my father saying, oh my God, my kid really did love me. Yeah. I think I did okay. And if Jerry Reinsdorf says, my dad's probably saying to God, you can take an extra day off. Don't worry about Sunday. I got it. I will take care of everything, because that's how my father was too.
Right.
But no, I hope that he knows how much I loved him, and I'm honored to say that Joe Black was my father, and not because of the Brooklyn Dodgers, not because of him playing with the Baltimore Eli Giants in the Negro League, but because he was a good man to me.
All right. Joe Black, More Than a Dodger is the name of the book. It is in stores now. Martha Jo, thank you so much. I've given the book to my son. He plays baseball so that he can read it, but I've started it as well, and I believe your father is proud of you as well.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice speaking with you, and please, if you come to Chicago, please call me.
That's a done deal. You offer wine, I call.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.